Nicaragua's Sandinista Revolution and Civil War, 1979–1990. From Dictatorship to Conflict. The Sandinista Revolution of 1979 marked a pivotal moment in Nicaraguan and Cold War history. It ended more than 4 decades of authoritarian rule under the Somoza dynasty and ushered in a revolutionary government led by the Sandinista National Liberation Front, FSLN. However, what began as a popular uprising soon turned into a protracted and violent civil conflict, with Nicaragua becoming a battleground in a global ideological struggle between the United States and the Soviet bloc. The fall of the Somoza regime. For over 40 years, Nicaragua was ruled by the Somoza family, a U.S.-backed dynasty that maintained power through control of the military, economic monopolies, and political repression. By the 1970s, the regime had become increasingly corrupt and violent, especially under Anastasio Somoza Debayle. A devastating earthquake in 1972 that destroyed much of Managua, the capital, revealed the regime's corruption. Somoza and his allies diverted international aid for personal gain. Public outrage grew, and opposition groups across ideological lines, liberals, conservatives, clergy, and students, began to support revolutionary change. The FSLN, Frente Sandinista de Liberación Nacional, a leftist guerrilla group named after anti-imperialist hero Augusto César Sandino, capitalized on the growing unrest. After years of insurgency and with broad popular support, the Sandinistas led a nationwide uprising. On July 19, 1979, they entered Managua and toppled the Somoza regime, which fled into exile. The Sandinista government. Reform and Revolution. The FSLN formed a revolutionary government junta and promised sweeping social, economic, and political reforms. Key initiatives included land redistribution to poor farmers, nationalization of banks and key industries, a mass literacy campaign that drastically reduced illiteracy, expanded healthcare and education access. The revolution was widely praised for its early achievements in social justice and inclusion, especially in rural and impoverished communities. However, tensions quickly arose both internally and externally. The rise of the Contras and U.S. intervention. The United States, under Presidents Ronald Reagan and George H.W. Bush, saw the Sandinista government as a Soviet-aligned communist threat in Central America. In response, the CIA funded and trained a counter-revolutionary force known as the Contras. Composed of ex-Somoza soldiers, disaffected peasants, and indigenous groups, the Contras launched a brutal insurgency aimed at destabilizing the Sandinista government. The war led to thousands of civilian deaths and atrocities by both sides, economic devastation and U.S. imposed trade embargoes, militarization, and internal repression within Nicaragua. The U.S. support for the Contras was mired in controversy, especially after revelations of illegal arms sales and funding through the Iran-Contra scandal, a major political scandal in the United States during the late 1980s. The Civil War and decline of the Revolution. As the war dragged on, economic hardship, food shortages, and growing political repression eroded public support for the Sandinistas. Though the FSLN had held elections in 1984, which they won amid allegations of limited opposition participation, international pressure mounted for a more open and peaceful resolution. In 1990, following a region-wide peace initiative and negotiations, Nicaragua held internationally observed elections. To the surprise of many, opposition candidate Violeta Chamorro, widow of a slain journalist and leader of a broad anti-Sandinista coalition, defeated FSLN leader Daniel Ortega. Chamorro's victory marked the end of the Civil War and began a new era of democratic transition, though political tensions and economic challenges remained. Legacy of the Revolution. The Sandinista era remains one of the most debated periods in Nicaraguan history. Supporters highlight its achievements in literacy, health, and anti-imperialism. Critics emphasize authoritarian tendencies, economic mismanagement, and civil conflict. The war left deep scars, with over 50,000 people killed, tens of thousands wounded or displaced, and a society deeply polarized. In the decades since, Daniel Ortega and the FSLN returned to power in the 2000s, this time through elections, though Ortega's modern rule has drawn criticism for authoritarianism, electoral manipulation, and human rights abuses. Conclusion: Nicaragua's Sandinista Revolution was both a hopeful moment of liberation and a tragic descent into conflict, shaped by Cold War geopolitics and internal divisions. It remains a symbol of revolutionary possibility for some, and a warning about the complexities of radical change for others.